Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the CPO series hosted by Dragonboat. I'm Sridhar. I'm in the customer growth team here at Dragonboat, and a little bit about our CPO series before we get started and introduce our guest for today. So the CPO series, as you know, is something that the Dragonboat hosts on a regular basis. We bring in world-class CPOs to come in and share their knowledge. And as you also probably know, Dragonboat is a SaaS platform that enables product leaders to accelerate outcomes. We have a suite of products, and we have a ton of customers around the world, and some of them are listed here. So without further ado, I would like to introduce today's guest, Rob Seidman, who is Chief Product Officer for the POS and Lending Division at US Bank. Welcome, Rob, to our CPO series. And yeah, can you start by sharing a little bit about your background and what you do at the bank?
Sure. Thank you for the invite. I really appreciate it. Happy to be here. I'm Rob Seidman. I'm the CPO of our BNPL effort here at US Bank. We also call it point of sale lending. It has like 8 names to it, but for now, our brand name is called Advance. So if you see that, that's what that is. Yeah, but I've been a banker and product manager for the last 25 years. Started my career years ago on a trading desk at Lehman Brothers, and flash forward 25 years and lots of product and strategy and sales roles later. I've ended up here at US Bank. Prior to US Bank, I was the general manager of the lending business at Sezzle, as well as the merchant product lead. Prior to that, I was at a startup for point of sale lending, 2017, that got sold to Ally Bank in 2019. Got rebranded Ally Lending, and actually that division just got sold to Synchrony and closed last week or this week, I think. Made the transition from a core banker to a digital person about 2014. Entered via Martech, ironically, and the ad tech stacks and digital marketing through Bank of America. I spent 13 years. So happy to be here and share the journey.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks for joining. So today, Rob will be talking about how to conquer product-led transformation, especially how we scale in large enterprises, and with a very practical example of what he's done at Advance over the last few months. So just again, a little bit of background before we get started. The goal is to keep this as an interactive discussion with Rob. We will touch on a lot of these topics, which is delivering MVP and merchant consumer experiences at BNPL, how Rob has also helped scale growth with Dragonboat, and then most importantly, adopting an agile mindset and a responsive approach to product-led growth, especially in a large organization. And then the final 2 topics, alignment with corporate strategies, goals, and OKRs, and of course, how do you make the team effective and make sure that the cultures are of the tools are aligned with the actual culture of the organization itself. So that's the general flow. We'll kind of bounce around a little bit, so feel free to put your questions in and send it over. Christina will be taking those questions and forwarding them to me, and Rob will try and answer these questions either in context or at the end, where we'll have a little bit of time set aside for Q&A. So, Rob, let me hand it off to you, and you can sort of kick off the conversation about how you sort of went about delivering MVP merchant and consumer experiences at BNPL, going from 0 to 1. And I'll flip to the next slide where I think the visual will be of help.
Sure. Happy to. Always love to talk about our product. So Advance, as a BNPL product, is B2B2C, which is unique when you build product experiences because you have 2 distinct user groups that you have to build for. First user group is the merchant, a business. So it's a very B2B centric sales cycle, demand generation, activation, onboarding loops are very B2B. And then on the other side of it is the consumer experience. The consumer experience is very much nearly a D2C consumer experience. The consumer journey steps in, it's a credit application, adjudication process, and then a loan booking at the end. When you stitch those two things together, that's B2B2C with critical handoffs that take place between the merchant and the consumer. And the consumer credit journey and the consumer service and journey, which is the other kind of major handoff that takes place in our journey. So 0 to 1, for those who've not done it before, did it a few times over the last 7 years. This is the third time I've done 0 to 1. 0 to 1, in certain respects, is incredibly straightforward in that the one, like the actual launch of an MVP, is kind of like the NASA moment inside a large organization or even small orgs. Like I'd say the same thing for when we did this in startups. Everybody knows what the goal is, and everybody's aligned to one single goal, which is launch. That's the only goal in mind. Like if you're OKR based, or if you're, setting goals for an individual product manager or engineering lead, everybody has the same goal in the year, which is launch. That's it, launch. And so the trade-offs take place in getting to what is in the launch, right? How you define MVP, what trade-offs you have to make. Do you adhere to dates, or is it about the experience that you're trying to meet? So for us, the 0 to 1 was not straightforward. It was actually quite bumpy. And inside big orgs, I can talk about some of the things we experienced, but the trade-offs that come with trying to launch inside a very big org when you're building a brand new business from scratch. What you're seeing on the screen right now is the consumer experience. This is a basic credit experience. Like every single screen, there's only 5 screens in the entire experience, but every single screen is scrutinized, terribly, from risk to compliance to legal, product engineering, front end people, back end people, and testing. Like in our organization, to make this come to life, it took, I don't know, 30 plus different engineering teams working together to stitch together our experience on top of US Bank's existing platforms, right? Inclusive of building brand new platforms that would house new logic and new components that we had to build specifically for B2B2C and point of sale lending business. The challenge is keeping everyone aligned. Our launch was about 3,500 epics completed in 9 months. It was a monumental effort for lots and lots of people. On our launch call on a Sunday night, we had 350 people, right? So these are not small efforts. These are huge efforts to turn this thing on. So the beauty of 0 to 1 is the end goal is exceptionally clear, right? The challenge is always the orchestration part and the trade-offs of what's in MVP and what's out of MVP, and then what happens right after it goes live. But that's kind of like the starting journey that I would articulate is we're very proud of the fact that from the first line of code written to launch in market is 9 months, not including the 6 months of planning and cajoling and convincing and everything you have to do and all the different orgs that are around the 70,000 person bank we have to make sure that we can do this and everyone's aware and clear and on board with what we are doing. So those are the key challenges like we face inside a big org.
That's fascinating to hear. So I guess, the thing there is, and I think you mentioned this in one of our prep calls, which is, hey, once you launch, you pat yourself on the back for a couple of seconds, and then it's back to sort of tracking results and iterating and improving the product. And that sort of sets the stage for the next thing, which is mindset, right? So how do we use a tool as a way to shift the team mentality right away and adopting an agile mindset to make that happen as you scale for growth. So maybe it might be good to touch on that a little bit and talk a little about how in the midst of a lot going on at once, how do you ensure you and the teams stay aligned with the corporate strategies, the goals, the OKRs, and are iterating at the same time.
Yeah, it's a good point, and one of the hardest things to do is when you're in a grind for 9 to 12 months with a singular goal in mind. When the goal is reached, resetting human beings is not the easiest thing to do, including myself. Like you really have to take a breath and remind yourself what you're really here to do. Everything is predicated on the business case, right? Like we entered this business as an organization because we felt like the business case made sense to the bank, right? It was accretive to earnings. It met multiple objectives of what the bank was trying to accomplish as a bank, right? And our job is to contribute to growth. That's our job. So launch is one step. That's the first step. It's a huge step, but it is still one step. And so the transition is first and foremost a mental transition of the human beings that are involved in building this product. And so for us, we did three things. First and foremost is OKRs changed immediately, right? So launch happened. Now we'll kind of exclude the break fix period and the beta feedback. All that we'll kind of like assume that we're handling that as we go. But the key thing we did was you're automatically moving from the launch as the goal to now all of a sudden having clear key results around business case driven objectives that you were trying to drive. That's first, right? And that, we use Dragon Boat as our tool. Every OKR gets loaded. Objective, which is more of a bunch of, it's qualitative in nature, but aspirational. And the KRs are very specific metrics that we're trying to reach that correspond to or link directly to the business case that we promised to deliver. So that's first, load the OKR so that there's clarity. Second is, as we moved from launch activity, and this is real, product-esque, when you write epics and stories that align to driving key results and assign them to individuals, the key for us, the second piece was making sure there's accountability that went from our group president all the way down to the junior PM who came out of college 3 months ago. Everybody is absolutely clear on their goals that ladder up to the key result and what we were there to do from a business perspective. Second is we had to make sure that the user experience that we promised was delivering. So we were ingesting feedback on a continuous basis through the process. And when you take feedback, like, we weren't sophisticated enough. The tooling wasn't built to have like feedback rivers and everything put into Slack. Like that's not what you had. What you had is individual conversations happening where the product didn't work, or it didn't work as expected, or you hit an edge case that you did not plan for. The 10 things that we had planned for, the happy path and the 10 unhappy paths. Now we're on happy path number 11 that you hit like right away. So you're just making sure you're adjusting your roadmap accordingly so that you are handling the user experience such that you can deliver on the promises made, right? Does it deliver the promise made to the user such that they can do what they're there to do, regardless of what we needed to get from an outcome perspective, from a business case. And then lastly is, okay, so once it's loaded and you have alignment, making sure that what you intended to do, our growth trajectory stayed on track. And so as you move over time from the launch to, call it, the first quarter to second quarter post-launch, you need to make sure that the progress is there. So you have steady velocity, right? And my inspection processes as the CPO and group product managers that made sure that what was important that we needed to deliver, like when you deliver MVP, by definition, it's feature light, right? You're not going out with a ton of features, right? So you have features that you have to fill in the gaps for. You have tech debt that you accumulated as part of MVP. You have user feedback that you're trying to address. You're just balancing those pieces and making sure that, going back to the OKRs, that everything is aligned to say we're delivering as we promised. Like what you have on the screen here is kind of what I look at as a snapshot to say, is my time and effort allocated to the most important things that we promised to deliver for our user? And is it delivering the business results that we promised to the business? Um, and this is, we use the tool as a way to say, okay, align the effort and then make sure that the allocation of the effort to the goal itself is proper, right? It's kind of like, does it make common sense that we align 40% of, you know, capacity and 40% of throughput and you know what I mean, to
Mhm,
this
mhm.
particular key result I'm trying to drive. So those are three things
That's a
I just
good,
kind of call out how we used it, how
yeah.
we used the tool, how we
So
thought about growth.
awesome. So one thing that I think came up in the questions actually, which is somewhat pertinent, which is why I sort of interrupted you. I think it was related to this slide here. Is there was a question that came in saying, how do you decide which metrics to use to measure success? And so that I think that would be maybe something that we could answer in context.
Sure. It starts with product strategy. So before we ever wrote the first line of code, we were crystal clear on what we were there to deliver. And it starts with how do you, here's how I started. I won't say how it always starts with what we had pillars, right? About how we approached our work. Um, First and foremost, we wanted it to be insanely fast and easy to use. B2B to C in context is by nature, I'm in a checkout, right? We call it checkout, but it's the moment of truth where a consumer is paying for a good or service. So what our platform had to be able to do was serve the user need, which is make the purchase affordable. That's first and foremost. And the way we do that is we had kind of pillars that we lived by, had to be incredibly easy to use, uh, wicked fast, and transparent. And the reason why transparency was critical for us is there's no off ramp from our checkout. You can't call. There's no. It's a fully digital experience, right? It's not aided by, like, if you apply for a credit card at a given bank, they say no, or they need you to call them. Like, there is no such thing in our experience. So these are kind of like design pillars that we set out to make sure that when we were building a user experience, that it met the user needs, and that we
Mhm.
lived by these pillars and constantly address those. Are we fast? Is it transparent? Is it insanely easy to use? And we're constantly testing, right, in our build, whether that's the case or not. And then lastly, choosing the metric specifically, especially post launch, is, does it drive to the business results? I mean, for us, we still have a business case, right? We still have hyper growth goals we have to hit for acquiring merchants, for winning the checkout, meaning when a merchant offers us as a payment method, do we win, right? And there's lots of ways to measure do we win, but in the way we estimated it, winning meant we get a share of checkout that we thought was commensurate with what we think the opportunity is for that merchant. Um, so those are some ways in which we do it. Is I establish pillars right up front. We're very clear about the user goals and our mission and why we're here and in what service we provide to the business that we serve. And then also, lastly, of course, not least of all, is do we deliver the business results that we promised as part of our business case?
Awesome. So moving on a little bit, I know that there are actually some questions that are coming in, and we only have 10 minutes. I think there are relevant questions as we move beyond here. But one thing I did want to touch on before we move on is in terms of how Dragonboat has helped you, both from a metrics perspective and from an OKR perspective. Can you maybe spend like a minute talking about how you've sort of streamlined this process top to bottom? You sort of said, hey, getting all the way from the group president down to the PM, everyone aligned and singing from the same song sheet. How has sort of Dragonboat allowed you to do that?
Yeah, I'll be honest. Uh, Dragon Boat is our Bible. If it doesn't exist in Dragon Boat, it does not exist. It doesn't exist as a KR and it doesn't exist as a work item. Everything has to be there because I manage by it. And this is how we deliver value, both to the user and to the business, right? Of which we serve. So first and foremost, we link Jira. Yet it's a must. Like it's a required thing that you do so that there's two-way communication between Jira and Dragon Boat. So wherever you're starting your initiative, feature, epic, whatever schema you operate under, that it moves back and forth because the visualization tools in Dragon Boat are much more robust and they're easier for us to kind of use to manage by. That's first. Secondly, is I actually inspect daily. So I am in Dragon Boat, and one of the things I'm doing is I pull up, a Gantt chart view, and I pull up, a progress view, and I want to make sure that we're making progress to finish the epics and stories related to driving against the key results. And we prioritize them. We are clear about priorities. Everyone is clear about priorities. We relook at KRs every quarter, but alignment happens on if you're doing continuous grooming, for example, or continuous um, evaluation every Monday, we're re-looking at backlogs and ensuring that we're working on the right stuff that's aligned to driving the results that we promised. And so I'm ensuring when I take a look that we're delivering uh, with some regularity that is predictable and that it is producing the results that we need to produce. We actually do go in and load the results back in Dragon Boat so I can visualize the results. Some are given to us directly, like what you see on the screen, which is as epics and stories complete, it does tell me how far along we are to completing a given feature initiative that we're trying to launch. And other stuff like individual KPIs that we develop that are levers. KPIs are not outcomes. We use them as levers, right? So it's a product manager's tool to say, is it correlated to driving the outcome, yes or no? I do require my product managers to go into Dragon Boat and add their KPIs every month so we can track KPIs, KRs against the individual objectives, and then an allocation view that says, are we working on the right stuff on a common sense basis against the key priorities? That's how we use it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's fascinating because I think a lot of our audience they love the practice of how organizations, small and large, use the tool to make sure that their use cases are kind of actualized. So I think this is super useful. So now I'm just going to move on, switch gears a little bit because we've got a ton of questions coming in that are kind of related to what we have on the next slide, and maybe we can make this a little bit more Q&A focused so that I think it'll drive value to the audience. One of the questions that sort of came up was, how do you balance agility and stability in a large enterprise environment, and how do you define an agile mindset? I guess there's somewhat related questions.
Yeah. This is a tough one. So in big orgs like ours, so I've been in startups with 20 people, and I've been in organizations with 250,000 people. They're not the same thing. Like one is not like the other for sure in terms of how you get work done. In really big orgs, what I have found is stability is easy. Inertia is really hard to break, right? So this is where product led becomes an interesting concept when you drive it into big orgs that have very stable operating procedures for good reason, right? You don't want to do things really quickly when it can affect millions of people, millions of time over, in short increments. Like you got to get things right. And the penalties for being wrong on occasion are very steep. So there's certain things where you really don't want to move really, really fast, and other places where you have control and it's small and bite sized, where you do want to move fast. You want to be releasing code every couple of weeks at a minimum. So I'll give one specific example. Legal risk and compliance inside banks is a really big deal. It doesn't matter whether it's a bank or not. Any regulated entity has a risk regime, has a compliance regime, has legal issues that you have to grapple with. One of the challenges was getting those groups of orgs to come move with me as fast as I move in Agile, right? So for example, if I update screens on that consumer experience we just showed, let's say I do a round of usertesting.com, I go out, I lay out a screen, I test 3 different concepts. It comes back as, here's the winner and I want to make changes to content on a screen that has to go through a legal risk compliance review every time you change something that goes through a consumer view. Um, you know, it's not normal that legal risk and compliance are moving in 2 week intervals for me, right? Where I need them to opine on stuff and give me an okay literally every 2 to 3 days, as fast as I'm churning through, 5-person user tests on a single screen. That is not the way they operate. So convincing lots of folks who operate on procedure-based and hardcore process-based routines to come with me agile is hard. But we did. We were successful to that degree on a few key measures that were stoppers, that were true blockers to us continuing, number one, continuing to code, and number two, releasing.
Mm-hmm.
So to the extent that you can bring people along with you to get in the agile mindset to say, we're going to run quick. Can you run quick with us? Can you give us smaller increments of time, much faster turns? That was a big deal for us to be able to launch and to be able to iterate post-launch.
Awesome. I know we only have a couple of minutes. So I was wondering whether you could stay on because I've got a couple more questions coming in.
Sure.
So if you're cool, we could just go through those before we close out. One question that came up was, and there are a couple of questions that came up with related to maintaining cohesive team culture while scaling and going through a kind of transformation process, and also how does that then affect prioritization, right? Top down versus bottom up, because there's top down priorities and then there's bottom up. There's wanting to innovate versus giving teams to, but yet being able to hit your business goals.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I hire very specifically. I have a philosophy around hiring teams and building teams where I want to construct teams that have a balance of experience, a range of backgrounds that fit the specific need. B2B2C is hard because you have multiple component pieces we have to put together. I need someone with consumer servicing expertise, consumer underwriting expertise, B2B demand generation, B2B onboarding and activation expertise. Like, it's not like these are plug and play product managers. So I hire with very clear intent on what the business needs to deliver as a business. We are a business, and our job is to deliver the business case, have a great user experience such that users continue to use us over and over again, and we can grow and win. Like, we're here to win, right? Like everybody else is. So I like to construct teams such that they bring to the fray two specific things. One is an attitude of we're all in it together. I just need the right attitude in product. Product is like, I view us as the people that are accountable. At the end of the day, we're accountable. I hold myself accountable for the business results, the product results, the user experience, the servicing, everything. And so if you don't come at this job with that mindset, I think, no, that's not my job. This is my job. You're we're misaligned as a team, and probably not going to be a good fit on my personal team. And then secondly is like, I do need some expertise to deliver the goods. Like, at the end of the day, you have to represent the user such that the user's mission, the user's needs are really met. So, I hire with that lens, and I construct teams that have balance, a balance of experience, a balance meaning years of experience, backgrounds, come from technical expertise, non-technical design, service, and a high level of empathy, certainly more than me. So I think the more that I can balance myself out, and the bigger issue I would say is hiring folks that have a desire to really do right by the user. When they come from that paradigm, we're always started in the right place from my perspective.
Awesome. Well, Rob, just to close out, I mean, do you want to? I know that you had some key takeaways that you wanted to share with the team. So maybe 30 seconds on that, and then we have a ton of other questions, but maybe we'll take those offline, and we can reach out to you to see if you can answer those.
Yeah, happy to. That'd be great. So my takeaways: our journey of 0 to 1 and then 1 to growth inside a big org, first and foremost, is um, uh, uh, MVPs are about a series of trade-offs, and we made huge trade-offs to get to MVP. I stuck to a timeline and then gave up on component pieces and features. And that was a choice we made, but it's about a set of choices to get to your MVP. The key thing is to iterate right after it's done, to shift the mentality as quickly as you possibly can to growth mode. It's not easy, it's actually quite hard, but I found the best way to do it is reset OKRs, assign and align OKRs, and inspect regularly. If you can do those things, that's a pretty good start for the transition between an MVP launch and a growth phase. And lastly is failure at banks is not often okay for a variety of reasons. Regulatory, not the least of which. But I think you have to figure out where you can fail fast. I'll just give one last anecdote. I did communication over and over and over again about the product strategy and the vision is critical to all this, like coming together and coalescing to deliver the value to the organization. So during the build process, I sent out a weekly note to about 200 people every Friday night that summarized the week's work, what worked, what didn't work, what is blocking us, and then around the industry, so that contextualizing it within the industry, our competitors, the regulatory environment, all that good stuff. Once launch happened, I stopped the weekly and moved to a monthly cadence and then started talking about results. So how I communicated our business was also a critical piece to how I think about the transition, right? We moved from the build and blockers of the launch to, okay, we're in business. How are we progressing against the business case, right? And the KRs that we laid out that I described in January a bit already. So those are the key takeaways that I would just offer up.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob, for your time. We're a little bit over, so thanks for staying on a little late. And yeah, feel free to get in touch with Rob here on LinkedIn. We also have a group demo with Dragon Boat on March 28th at 8 a.m. Pacific. So here's the QR code for that. So yes, if you are interested, based on what you've learned today, or have other questions regarding the product, join those group demos. They tend to be very insightful from a feature and also just how the product works perspective. So again, thanks, Rob, for your time. Appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your insights.
Thank you. It was great fun. Take care.
Thanks, audience, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.